Welcome to the Rex Andrews Show. Glad to have you. If you're a first-time listener, thanks for tuning in. We're glad to have you and glad to have you in the conversation. Now, we always ask our first-time listeners a couple things. One, don't forget to subscribe because we want you to get all the latest and greatest updates. And of course, I'm not bashful or ashamed. I will beg. So if you feel like we're doing a good job and you love the show, give us those 5 stars. It helps us for placement in the app stores. Well, speaking of app stores, we're in 23 different ones. So if you don't like the one you're at, go look for another one. They're everywhere. And we're also found on social media. For those who are coming back and listening, thank you. I always want to say thank you. Thanks to you and our great guests. We are one of the fastest growing podcasts on the planet. We have listeners in 32 countries, 6 continents. And I always joke around about this. If I could figure out how to market to those pesky penguins, but probably more important, find out a place where we could recharge their cell phones, we would have listeners in Antarctica. And I want to, a new feature that I'm doing because we are in so many markets, I want to thank and introduce and recognize our market. So I want to welcome and thanks to the folks that are listening in Waterloo, Iowa. Okay, so if you don't know where Waterloo is, look them up. That's okay, so we're all over the place. So thank you. All right, last thing of housekeeping items, please make sure that you check in and go to the rexandrewshow.com website. And the reason I ask you to do that is for one thing. We interview these great people that are doing amazing things, but we don't have time to tell all of their story. So on our website, we have a brief bio, but more importantly, links to all of their online assets. So their websites, their social media, stuff like that. So when you find somebody that's interesting, you want to know more, come to the website. You can find them, look them up, connect with them. And it's a great way to stay connected to the show. We have all of our previous guests, our current guests from today, and also everybody else that's in the queue. We usually have about 30 to 50 people lined up to come on and talk to you. So thank you for tuning in. All right. So today, just like always, it's our human stories. And my problem is I have too many interests for just one lifetime. And around the corner is another discovery. So I get distracted very easily. So today I've got another discovery for you. And so I'm going to introduce her. Quite a dynamic person. She's an educator, a speaker, but probably most important title is that she's a mom, and she is become a basketball aficionado. And we'll talk about that for a moment or two. She's got an aspiring young basketball player in her home. She's a best-selling author, and we'll talk about that. She does some amazing things in that area. And quite a dynamic individual, high energy, big personality. And so I'd like to welcome to the show this afternoon, Michelle Bowen. Michelle, how are you?
Hello, Rex. Thanks so much for having me. Hi, everyone, and hello to the folks in Waterloo, Iowa today.
Waterloo, Iowa, that's right. You haven't lived unless you've been to Waterloo, and I have. I've been through there. I didn't say how long I was there. It was through there. It wasn't I stayed there. It was through there. So, no, great praise. Glad to have them. So, we like to tell stories about people. Success does not just fall out of the sky. Recently, this summer, I had parts of a United Airlines engine fall just 3 blocks from my house. And so that was kind of an interesting story. It was all over social media and news worldwide. But success doesn't fall out of the sky like that. Okay. So we want to talk about, not only your story and what you're doing today and all the things that you do as a professional, but how'd you get there? So it's a long list, and don't worry, you don't have to write it down because I'll remind you. Okay. So we want to know, where were you born? Where did you grow up? That can often be very different. Okay. We want to know things that you did as a youth. What did you focus your time on, whether it was sports or reading or theater, dance, computers, shoplifting. And don't laugh, I had a guest that had been on the show that was a car thief by age 15. So we never know. Then I also want to know a little bit about and to tell our audience about your family. So do you have siblings? Do you have siblings that survived your torment? Do you also, what were your influences from your parents? So what your parents do when you were growing up, the type of jobs and stuff, because A lot of people talk about formative decade kind of being in your 20s, but I think it's more than that. I think it starts from the beginning because parental influence can be so important to people. Number one, it can be very supportive. And wow, my parents were great. They supported everything I did. Two, it could be, my parents were just so, non-involved. Or three, it could be, oh my goodness, my parents were an example I want nothing to do with. I want to be opposite of what they're doing. So we'll learn about that, learn a little bit about your education, some key pivot points, what you've done along the way, some life learning lessons, stuff like that. And then we'll end up with what you're up to today, and talk about your book and the things that you're doing to make impact and change and all that fun stuff. So if you could, Michelle, begin at the beginning. Where were you born?
Sure. I was born in Sydney, Australia, and very soon in my early years moved to Canberra, which is the capital of Australia. Okay. It's a government town, and my dad was a public servant. My dad had always been inspired to be an entrepreneur, but he ended up in the public service. And so many years into my life, when I was sort of in high school, he decided he would become the entrepreneur that he'd always wanted to be, and he bought a news agency. And wow. I'm very proud of my dad. He's run a few businesses since then. He ran the news agency, and he also at the moment has a beautiful vineyard in a gorgeous New South Wales country town named Mudgee, and he's been very successful running his vineyard. So I think from a young age I had that role model that my dad was always a very hard worker. Okay. And he was really driven to be an entrepreneur. My mum ran the home and also worked as a chief executive officer of a variety of different businesses. She was a high-performing person too. Okay. And all together, they just believed that I would be successful. I grew up thinking that I didn't know what it would be, but I would do something that would mean that my life felt like a success. So I've never thought any other thought than everything's going to be okay.
Well, that's great. That's fantastic. Do you have siblings?
I do. I have one brother. Okay. He's the chief financial officer in a big childcare organisation in Sydney, Australia. And that's where I live now. I live in Sydney. And so, yes, just a small family, but we're slowly growing. At the moment, I have 3 daughters. And so I also have lots of boyfriends and partners as well. So our family is slowly growing.
Oh, that's great. So 3 daughters, what are the ages of your daughters?
Currently 22, 19, and 16.
Okay, fantastic. Oh, those are fun years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody that follows my show knows the tribe of 5 plus 1. And I had a decade of diapers. I had a decade of sports and dance and stuff like that. And now I'm just at that expensive time, a decade of college tuition. So
yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. Well, yes, go ahead.
I was just going to say to you, I was a ballet dancer as a kid. You asked, what were we into when we were children? I was a ballet dancer. I was in something called the Canberra Youth Ballet Company, and I was very, very motivated to be a good dancer. I did get to the point where I had an Achilles heel injury, and so I had to quit. On the night of the closing performance. It was all very dramatic. So I've always been on a stage since I was very little. And even though I couldn't keep going with the ballet, I knew I was destined for a stage in some way. So it makes pretty good sense, doesn't it, that I would end up as a professional speaker.
Sure. That's great. I am a father of 3 dancers. And most people, if you're not involved with dance, you don't understand that ballet is core to all other dances. That's where you learn everything that then, that's the root of everything. So that's cool. And I've been to more ballet performance and recitals than I ever want to admit. And funny stories of my son and I counting the number of lights in the ceiling and things like that. So yes, but we were supportive and we grinned and we were there. So
you clapped loudly at the end.
That's right. Clapped loudly, supported them, great, and paid all those dance tuitions. So fantastic.
Wonderful.
All right. So you grew up, you had a good family there, small but close. Were your parents really busy? Were they fully engaged? Looking back, what's your perspective now that you're a parent? What do you think your childhood looks like compared to how you're raising your daughters?
Yeah, I think it's so interesting, isn't it? Whether we take the role model that we're given or we, we discount it entirely. My dad was very busy. Running a news agency is a huge undertaking. He was up at 4 o'clock every morning delivering the newspapers and getting chilblains on his ears because it was so cold, throwing the newspapers out of the window.
Yeah.
He was really hard worker and still is in his 70s, a very hard worker. So he was present but not there, if you know what I mean. So he was supportive and he was in my life importantly, but just kind of not there physically. Mum, on the other hand, was very much there, and she was everything. She was sewing those costumes. She was running the debut. She was on the P&F running the school, this and that. She was just very involved. She knew all the names of my friends, and we had a lot of parties and kids coming over all the time. And she was incredibly involved. So I think I've learned some really good lessons from both of those models. I think I'm quite involved in my kids' life, but as the primary income earner in my family, my husband chose when my third daughter was born to be a stay-at-home dad, and that I would be the primary income earner. So I think I've definitely picked up that role model from my dad to be a hard worker and focused on bringing in the bacon.
Well, the reason I asked that question is, I talk to a lot of people, and some people really terrible backgrounds with horrible strife and family situations and just terrible things, abuse and all these kinds of things like that, and alcoholism, blah, blah, blah. But when people still come from a successful financial perspective or career perspective, that doesn't always mean they're fully engaged, and so it presents different examples to us, so hey, dad can be there and he's paying for everything and he's being the hard worker and stuff, but maybe he's not home to catch some of the tears and to do some of those things. So I always ask, because it's important for us to take a look and say, yeah, how'd I do that? Because every parent looks back and go, oh my goodness, why did I do this or that, and how could I have done differently? And it's hard. You don't want to play the comparison game. All right, so fantastic. So you finished up school, you finished up high school. Did you go on to university? Did you get into trades, or what was your next hop from there?
Yeah, I went straight to university. I was very young and silly. I had no idea what I wanted to be or do, just that I would be good at it, whatever it was. So my dad encouraged me to go and do an arts degree at university, and that's what I did. And then I moved very quickly into working. And in the first couple of weeks of getting a job in Sydney, I went to university in Canberra, the Australian National University, to do the arts degree. When I finished that degree, I moved to Sydney, and because Sydney's really where most of the jobs were at that time. So I got a job in a very successful company, a property company, very, very successful construction company. And in the first couple of weeks, I realised that I wanted to be a trainer. That I didn't care what I trained, but I wanted to be able to educate people in how to be better in their jobs. So I was only 22 or something. I was really young, but I just thought I could add some value somehow. So back in those days, you'll laugh because I know that you're a sales geek from the IT industry. So do you remember Word Perfect?
Oh, absolutely.
So I remember teaching Word Perfect to people in the office from my desk.
No, okay.
And I was really good at it.
So we're going to date each other here as far as time. Was this the DOS versions of WordPerfect, or was this the Windows version?
Yes, the DOS version of Word on that black screen.
Black screen.
Yeah.
Hard returns and all the DOS codes. And
so some of your younger listeners won't realize that in the olden days, Rex, when you and I were young, actually it wasn't intuitive. There wasn't a word that said file save or anything like that on the computer. It was just a black screen, and you had to know, like coding, you had to know what keys to press to make your text bold or to enter it down a line. And most of my colleagues in that organization were so busy in their jobs, they didn't have time to work out how to use their computers. So I was pretty helpful. I helped them all work out how to use that Word Perfect, and realized very quickly that if teaching was something I was good at, perhaps I should go and study further. So I ended up doing a graduate certificate certificate in adult education and then a master's degree in adult education. And that sort of set my path to be a corporate trainer.
Okay. We'll make everybody laugh. If I were to type on my keyboard right now in DOS, CD space star dot star, what would you do?
I don't know.
That's a delete function. You're going to delete everything in the directory.
Oh my God. Yeah. Look, I don't remember it now. It's like I've repressed all those bad memories.
That's funny. Yeah. So, gosh, we walk around today with, these smartphones who have 10 times the computing power, the biggest mainframes back in those days, and memory and stuff like that, and access to everything under the sun.
And we just take it for granted, right?
Yeah, absolutely take it for granted. And the thing is, I was talking to an interview this morning in Dubai, and there was just talk about the education system, and I'll speed through this real quick, but we've changed so much and have so much technology information, but we haven't changed the way we teach people to use it. So we just have this unstructured, the world at your tips in your pocket, but we don't even think about how to change the way we teach and stuff today. So it's really phenomenal amount of change we've gone through in just, the last 40, 50 years. It's been crazy.
Yeah, you're speaking my language, because I really believe, and I've heard you say this in other interviews with other guests, that you can be the expert, but unless you're great at articulating your perspective, an idea is just an idea if no one's listening.
That's right, exactly. So, wow, what a young age. Now I'm going to kind of give you a little bit of chiding here. I mean, you got a real job with an arts degree?
Exactly. I know. Well, so I realized I had to go and study something else quite quickly.
Quite quickly? I mean, if you have a liberal arts degree today, what kind of job do you get? You mainly have straddled yourself with student loan debt. I mean, holy cow.
Indeed. And in Australia, we have a disgusting thing called HECS, which is how you pay your loans back. And I did. I had a huge HECS debt, and I'm not quite sure what value it was. But I do have to say, when I got that first job in Sydney, it was because I had a degree. They've never hired someone into that job before who had a university degree. And at that time, they didn't even care what degree it was. So I was pretty lucky.
Yeah. It's an interesting world now, because the dynamics and value of degrees have changed. It's really hard, that we see here in the United States, and I'm sure it's very similar down there, because things aren't that much different, is if you just have a liberal arts degree, people kind of look at you like, well, how can you help my business? Well, because they're looking for specialty things. They're looking for social media marketers or HR people, or, all kinds of things. And so, you were quite fortunate to grow up in that era and have an arts degree. I've got a niece that has a degree in folk dance, and she can't get a job because, she has to go get a teaching certificate, because there just aren't jobs for that type of a degree.
That's right. Well, we have lawyers who are out of work here in Australia, so it doesn't really matter what degree you get. I still think it relates to your ability to communicate clearly, to have a great personality. People want you in their team. They want to hang around you.
Right.
They want a bit of what you've got.
That's right.
So whatever degree you've got, you're still going to have to work on your ability to win people over.
Yeah, life is it is always a sales business. Everything you're doing. So how long did you take? Did they give you the training role right away? Did you stay there? What happened?
Well, I was 22 years old. I just arrived in Sydney from a 3-month overseas holiday with my boyfriend, Rod the Bod, at the time. And I got this job, and I realised a couple of weeks in that it was a very successful company, because remember, I'd grown up in a government town and I didn't really know much about corporate Australia. So I wasn't even sure where I was working. I'd never really heard of them. But a couple of weeks in, I realised, oh my goodness, I'm working for a company that's one of the best in Australia. And so after a couple of weeks of helping people at their computers, I did decide, yes, I think I need to be a trainer. So I enrolled in that graduate certificate in adult education, and I put a proposal to the bosses, age 22, Rex, honestly.
Wow.
I was so bold. I look back now and think, gosh, if I was that bold still, I'd be very successful.
Yes.
But, I put a proposal, and I said to the bosses, I would like you to create a training department in this company, and I will be the trainer, and you're going to need to hire me a boss, because I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm studying this at university, and this is the reasons why we need a training department in our division. And they accepted my proposal at age 22, and there you go, hired me a boss, and off we went.
Oh my goodness. So not only did you create a job, you created your own boss. That's crazy.
Yeah. And a whole department.
And a whole department, a department of one, but there's, yeah, well, two, you've got a boss. So
Yeah,
oh,
that's
that's funny.
right.
What a great story.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people can barely claim that they just hung on to got a job, not only created a department. That's great. So how long did you do the training thing?
I did that for that company in a variety of different divisions for a few years. I realized after a couple of different jobs, teaching all sorts of things. I taught payroll computer systems, I taught customer service, I taught how to write a performance appraisal document for someone. You know, I just taught all sorts of things, but I realized that probably consulting was the thing I wanted to do. So I left the big lend-lease corporate giant and I joined a smaller training consultancy that specialized in teaching presentation skills. And they're very cool in Australia, this particular company. It's called Morafay Workshops, and they use NIDA trained actors. NIDA is our National Institute of Dramatic Art. So, you know, people like Mel Gibson went there. And so lots of famous people have gone to NIDA that you guys would know in the States as well.
Sure.
And so it was very fun. I got to travel around with these actors running courses for corporate people. The trainer would explain what to do and then the actor would demonstrate it. So it was a fun concept. And
Wow.
maybe you've heard of the show Home and Away.
Yeah, sure.
So a lot of the actors from Home and Away worked for Morafay. And so that was a bit fun. You know, you're in a corporate training course and in walks this actor that you see every night on telly in your house. It was quite fun. So I worked for them for quite a while and then realized I learned as much as I could from those actors. They were all very accomplished and amazing at the whole stagecraft part of presenting.
Mm-hmm.
But I realized that working for a small consultancy like that sort of had its limitations in terms of my own growth and development. And as I mentioned, you know, I was really sure I was going to be successful fast. By then I was sort of 24 or something like that. And I'm thinking, oh, time's running by me and I've got to hurry up. I've got to keep moving. So I joined another consultancy where I got to really learn the nuts and bolts of running a successful business, selling well, managing your customer relationships well, dealing with the management of your balance sheet and your costs, and what are really the skills of running a successful small business. And that was just unbelievable. My mentors there, Robert Scanlon and Rod Matthews, were like dads to me. They were very cool, and they took me under their wing and they taught me how to be a better trainer, how to run a good business, how to love your customers. And really, after a couple of years of doing that, I became pregnant with my first child, and that sort of set the scene for me to leave them, sadly, but to leave them and set up my own company. So I set up my own business when I was 28 and I called it Michelle Bowden Enterprises. Good name, right?
Yeah, I guess that works. You didn't spend a whole lot on branding, did you?
Exactly.
Oh, that's great. What a funny story. So, were you focused mostly on what type? Were you doing training for presentations, sales presentations?
Yeah.
When you stepped out on your own, you know, what were you teaching at that time?
Yeah, the main reason I stepped away was because the boys that I'd been working for were a general soft skills training consultancy, sales, negotiation, customer service, leadership, everything. And I, by then, had worked out loud and clear that presentation skills was the thing that I loved the most and that I was definitely the best at teaching. Mm-hmm. And all I wanted to do was specialize in presentation skills. So that's really one of the main reasons why I broke away. I just wanted to do that every day and focus in that niche. So that's what I did. I set up the business, made it a presentation skills training consultancy, and really from the beginning was doing three main things. I was very lucky when I decided to break away. I'd been pitching to a big financial services company in Australia that was very successful at the time called AMP. And AMP at that time was really in its heyday. They had a lot of money for training and they gave me a chance. They put 20 courses through my business in my first year of trading with a small baby. And because of that, my husband was able very shortly after that to really cut back to a part-time worker. And then by the time we had our third child, I was doing so well in the business, he became a full-time dad.
Oh, well, that's great. So how many students a year were you training generally?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I run a 2-day persuasive presentation skills masterclass. And prior to COVID, I ran that live every week. And this week, I just ran it for the 904th time.
Holy
so
cow.
I've run that 2-day masterclass 904 times, pretty much every week of my life for the last 22 years. And there's a maximum of 10 people in that course. So
at least 9,000 people. Yeah.
It's about 10,000. So 10,000 people, but also, I'm a speaker. So I run similar content for large audiences as well. If you had to add it all up, it's probably more like 50,000, but the people that have been through the masterclass more like 10.
Wow, that's a lot of people. So, I used to work for a sales trainer, and that's where I got a lot of my skills. Back in the late 80s, mid to late 80s, I worked for a guy named Tom Hopkins, who was a real estate trainer. Okay.
Yeah.
Tom wrote books and all kinds.
Tom Hopkins.
Tom Hopkins, and that was the early days of Tony Robbins and
Yeah.
John Tracy and just all those kinds of guys. I was around in those circles and stuff. But learning those skills has been a lifetime skill set. Now, I've always been an extrovert type person, It's not hard to twist my arm to talk. I mean, gosh, look what I do now. But wow, what a great foundation, because I learned throughout the rest of my life, everything's sales. If you're going to get married, you need to be a salesperson, right? If you're going to, get any type of job. I mean, I pretty much learned of how to close interviews because, I was going to ask for the job. I wasn't there just to, talk to somebody. I'm there to negotiate, persuade, and get a job. Yeah. So fantastic.
You would have known how to work out in advance what the meeting was for. And then you would have gone into those meetings with a very clear direction that was going to help achieve that outcome, whatever that was. I've seen that with my kids actually, Rex, because over the years, well, of course, there's no pressure to be good at public speaking when Michelle Bowden is your mum.
Right.
So they did all win at Parliament House here in Australia because they really, it was either you win or you have to leave my house. I'm joking. So they did, they've learnt those skills too from a very young age. And just the other day, my 19-year-old studying pre-med, and she got 91% in a public speech that she had to do as part of her university degree for medical science. And she didn't ask me for any help at all. She at 19 years old, she knew exactly what she needed to do, and she just got on with it and got 91%. So those kids, without even meaning to have learned what they need to do to be great communicators. And I also am proud of them that when they're out and about socially, if someone says something that they think is unfair or inappropriate, they're very brave and bold, and they'll stand up to that person. They're not shy to say what you just said isn't right, and this is why.
Well,
and that's because they've grown up, I suppose, with a public speaking expert in their family.
It's a foreign concept to me because I was born with this confidence of, being a leader, and I was always involved in student council and all these things from a little kid. Okay. Captains of just about everything I was in, all that kind of stuff. Well, I didn't realize how paralyzing public speaking is for so many people.
Yeah, 80%. We've done some research in our company. We surveyed 800 people, and 80% of people admitted to some sort of fear or anxiety over speaking in public at some point in their life. So it's called glossophobia. It's a diagnosable fear, like a phobia of public speaking, and that's a real thing. And I would probably speak to maybe one person a week for the last 22 years. I get the odd random call from people, and it's mostly because something's gone wrong for them. They've spoken at a board meeting and they've gone blank, or they've presented at an executive leadership team briefing and they've said something silly, or they've forgotten what they were trying to say. And it's mostly a negative experience that occurs at an adult age that then causes them to panic that that's going to happen again. And it's so sad to me because, like, as you say, it comes naturally to you. It didn't, I don't know if it came naturally to me or not. I do believe anyone can learn to be a great speaker.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
You got to follow the formula. But what is really interesting is, and if anyone's listening to this and you can relate to this glossophobia, you know, your brain feels like it's shaking in your head and you feel dizzy and you feel like you're going to faint or be sick. That is a medical condition, and that is not something you should live with. I hope that listeners who are relating to this can hear what I'm saying. Go and get help. Not from your GP who's going to prescribe drugs to you so that your heart stops thumping. Go and speak to a real life expert who can teach you the formulas that great speakers follow so that you don't have to feel like that anymore. I'm coaching people on a daily basis out of this kind of dreadful nervousness, and it's so curable. It's so fixable. Don't live with that. That's like, life's too short. Don't live with a fear of this public speaking.
Wow, you know, you just described those feelings, like, you know, the instability and all that good stuff and all that, you know, it's almost like a vapor lock. But my problem is it isn't glossophobia. It's usually dishwasherophobia or laundryophobia that has me feeling like that.
And perhaps you need, you know, some sort of house tidying up expert to help you.
Some sort of therapist to get me through that, you know, kind of thing. And certainly it could be along garage phobia, psycho stuff, like, you know, it could be. So
you need the home edit team from Netflix.
That's right. So, well, you know, I you know, like I was saying before, I just it was never dawned on me because I just, you know, that was just natural. I was the ability to stand up in front of any group, any size, any place, anywhere, anytime, and just talk. And, you know, I guess it's a lot of that's just based in self-confidence, and then also too, not having very good presentation skills, you know, and you know, like you said, anybody can learn to do that. Anybody can be a good speaker. And sometimes you can take the most boring, dull content, and if you're a good speaker, you can make it into something that's entertaining, engaging, and follow on.
Indeed, that's your job.
Yeah.
And, you know, I have engineers and data scientists and people like that saying to me, but Michelle, never start a sentence with but Michelle, Rex.
Yeah.
But they say, but Michelle, I'm an engineer. I don't have to be interesting. And, and I say, well, actually, because you are an engineer, you have to try harder than the rest of us to be interesting. Otherwise, we're going to send everyone to sleep with that dreadful content you've got there. So that's their job, all of our job, no matter what our content is. And many people do describe their content as dry or technical in nature. That's the job of a great speaker, is to zhuzh it up and make it feel fabulous to the audience. You want to be worthy of remark. You know, you want to say something that people who are listening feel so interested in and so compelled to take action about that they leave your meeting and they go and talk to other people about it. That's the job of a great speaker.
So I have a pet peeve when it comes to speakers, and I just experienced it this last week. I can't stand when someone reads a talk.
Yeah, a speech.
So frequently in the church I belong to, people are assigned to give talks, you know, during the main, you know, the worship service. And there was a guy this last week, the content was amazing, but he was a snoozer. I'm talking a snoozer. Oh, dear. And you know, he's reading from it, and I'm like, in his role in the church, he does this like every other weekend.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, wouldn't you go get some skills so you can make this alive and vibrant? Because everybody was nodding off. I just can't say. I don't like people that read slides. I don't like people who, because I'm crazy. All right. And I'll give you a little tips here. We're not reach around and pat myself on the back, but generally when I've got a topic to speak on, I do a lot of Sunday school lessons and things like that, and other types of small speaking. I'll study it up, and I'll study it up, the topic really good.
Yeah. Damn right you will.
That's right. And then I will.
Otherwise, I'm coming for you.
I will put on a card or a piece of paper, a half sheet of paper, 5 or 6 notes, and I'll talk for a half hour.
Yeah.
Or more. And so, but that's because I've done a lot of it, I guess. But when I see, you know, people who just they have great content and stuff like that, and they have to read it, that tells me they haven't prepared it.
No.
They haven't gotten any skills to do that and stuff. And I just look at them from another planet, because people will ask me, well, where's your talk? And I'm like, well, I got a sheet right here. These notes.
I respect this process, and so I've done the work.
Yeah,
right. So what that is, I just think it's it's so easy to judge, but someone like that who's reading out their speech at church, they've put the effort in. They think they've done what they need to do to be good, but they're stuck in a paradigm that's not working for them. And I'm always proud when someone will ring me and they'll say, can I do coaching with you, Michelle? Because I've got one speech once that I'm going to deliver at XYZ conference, and I just really want to do a good job of it. So would that be all right? Could we do some coaching? And, it's not cheap to do that kind of work with someone like me, but they want to put the money to it. They want to put the time to it. It's going to take them 6 hours of coaching with me to get up to scratch. And they realize, like you say, they realize that there's actually some effort to put into it. Not everybody realizes that. A lot of people have only had such bad role models, really, from their boss or their other colleagues or their church or wherever. They've had such bad role models that they don't realize what good looks like. They don't realize how good they could be if they just did work with someone who could really make them exciting in the way that they delivered their message, whatever it is.
Whatever it is. Well, and I think it just is a life skill. I wish it was a life skill that they really pushed on kids in high school.
In Australia they do.
Oh, they do.
In Australia, you do public speaking from the age of 5. So this is the stuff that I'm laughing with you that my kids all won. So kindergarten is the first year of school when they're like 4 or 5 years old, and they do a 1-minute speech, and it's on the topic of my friends, my best friends, or something like that. And they have to stand up and do a little 1-minute speech, and then they pick a winner. And then from the winners in the class, they then pick a school, like, overall winner in the age group. And then all those gorgeous little things go off to the Parliament House and they all compete against one another all through the ages. Yeah, it's gorgeous.
We had that, but it was an elective type class. So it's not something that everybody was forced to do. And I think everybody needs to learn how to do it, because like life, there's too many negotiations, there's too many persuasions, there's too many things that if you can't articulate what you're doing, then you're no better than the next guy. Yeah,
I say it doesn't matter how good your message is if no one's listening. You can be the most expert of all experts, but if no one's listening, no one knows what you think.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Another sad thing that I see a lot of is when people come on my course and they say to me, the reason I'm here is because I hate public speaking and I avoid it at all costs. I delegate it to all the people around me. And I suddenly woke up one morning and realized that I am being bypassed. People are taking the jobs that I would be better at. People are getting credit for my ideas because they're the ones that are presenting the ideas on my behalf. And so the reason I'm in a course is because I realized I've got to do my own talking. I've got to be the one that expresses my big ideas. Yeah, so not everyone realizes that, but maybe at some point when you do realize that, it's good to seek some help.
Michelle, I ran right past this because I do this a lot earlier in the interview, but can you throw out your website or social media where people want to find you? Because there are people who are listening along. And so how do people get in touch with you online?
I have a website, which is www.michellebowden.com.au. And also on LinkedIn, Michelle Bowden. Facebook is Michelle Bowden Enterprises. And I'd love to connect with all the listeners that are listening today. Thanks for listening in.
Yeah. So what's the biggest area of improvement that people need? If you were to look across your 10,000 plus who've been through your course, what do you think is like the most common area that people need help in?
It's a good question, and it's got a complicated answer that I'll simplify. The biggest need is not the thing they think they need. The biggest gap is often something that they haven't even noticed they're not doing, because you don't know what you don't know. So there are 3 strategic phases to a persuasive presentation in business. The phases are analysis, design, and delivery. Analysis is where you work out, what am I trying to achieve as the presenter, and what does my audience need to hear from me? It's Very important. What is the audience needing? And there's a beautiful model that helps you do that. Then the second phase is design. There are two main models that you use to design a presentation. One's a foundational model that addresses the deep down questions audience members are wondering. And then there's a model that sits over the top of that, a bit like the icing on a cake. And it's full of these things we call linguistic patterns. A linguistic pattern is essentially the way you combine your words in your sentences. And when you do it cleverly, it makes you very persuasive, very engaging, and therefore very confident in the way you're delivering your message. And back in 2006, I created a model that sits over the top of the best practice model for crafting a speech or a communication. And my model is called the Persuasion Blueprint. It includes 13 of these linguistic patterns that you put in certain orders, so you know exactly what to say and when to say it in order to be as persuasive and effective as possible in your presentation. And then the third phase is design, and that's all the fun stuff about public speaking that most of your listeners would relate to, things like your stance, your gesture, your eye contact, your voice, your breathing, your slide design and delivery, how you interact with the audience, how you do a Q&A, all those sort of things to do with the way you deliver the message is the final phase. So most people come to me because they think, A, they want to manage their nerves, and B, they want to be better at using their hands, or some silly thing like they don't like their own voice or something like that. But actually, you can hear in my explanation here that the thing that is so important is getting that analysis and design right. If you analyze the audience correctly and know what you're trying to achieve, and then you design the message really effectively, and you know deep down inside that this is a great message and it's going to achieve the outcomes you want, then you don't really need to worry too much about your delivery and your nerves, because you're awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So the thing they think they need is different to what I think they need.
I'm a consumer of podcasts because I'm trying to, perfect my craft. I had a radio program. It was a lot like what I do today, a free form interview show. Yes. But I listen to a lot of podcasts that are they're more presentations and they're more a product. And oh my goodness, I have listened to some of these. And I just wonder, did you spend any time prepping for this thing? Did you design it? Because, podcasts, for those types of podcasts, it's a presentation. And you can tell when people haven't put any effort into it, that they just sort of scratched out some notes on a notepad and they went for it. And man, if they would have just made some minor modifications, it could have just completely changed.
Yeah. Rex, I think you're right. I think most people think of presenting as that random thing you do once in your life where there's a stage and a lectern and a big PowerPoint, when in fact I define presenting as any form of communication, one-to-one, one-to-few, one-to-many, where your objective is to change their thinking or behavior. So I think of telling my 22-year-old to pick up her bath towel as a presentation. I think of negotiating with a relative about where we're having Christmas this year as a presentation. And certainly everything at the top end of, I've got lots of clients at the top end of town that I'm helping win pitches at, 700 million Australian dollar type deals, like huge deals. And because I specialize in persuasive presenting. So at that level, it's obviously presenting, but it's so interesting to me when you're doing a pitch for a $700 million infrastructure project. It is fascinating to me that some of those people, that maybe 25 people in a bid team, some of those people don't even think that what they're saying to the potential buyer is a presentation.
Oh my goodness.
They think of themselves as a subject matter expert and they're explaining something to their possible customer, but they don't think of it as a presentation. That is a very important presentation. And if that company wins that $700 million deal, you're all going to be set in your jobs for the next 5 years. That is incredibly important. And yes, that's a presentation.
Well, you and I think alike, because whenever I'm going into anything that's significant, and it doesn't even have to be significant, if it's just I'm going to persuade the kids where we might go on a vacation, or to get my son to help me with a project, or whatever it is, I'm already role-playing that conversation in my head way ahead of time, and I'm anticipating what the outcomes might be, where his responses are to be, and then what my counter responses are to be. And my kids think, well, you're being manipulative. I'm like, no, I am being artful in my communications, because I'm not going to lose.
It's probably an interesting conversation topic for us, the difference between manipulation and persuasion.
Yeah.
I don't know if you do you want to go there?
Yeah, let's go there for a few minutes. Why not?
Yeah, okay. So I get asked about this a lot. If you're persuading, aren't you just manipulating? And
No.
I think manipulating is it's a value-laden word, isn't it?
Yeah,
None of us really want to be known as manipulative. Actually, in the body of knowledge tells us that when it comes to influencing the people around us, there are 5 main ways that we go about doing that. And if you think of it as a linear continuum, on one end of the continuum is the aggressive approaches, which is forcing and directing. At the other end of the continuum are the passive approaches, which is modeling and guiding. And then in the middle is the assertive approach, and that is what we call persuasion. So when someone is manipulating you, they are at the forceful end or at the passive end of that continuum. They are not in the middle, in the persuasive. They're not being persuasive.
Right.
So maybe that helps to sort of clarify the difference that, and I think it's all to do with your intent, right? So if you're trying to convince someone to do something that is not in their best interest,
that's manipulation.
And therefore you're in your own shoes, you only care about yourself, not them, then, which is what we call first position in neurolinguistic programming, then when you're in that first position, you are manipulating, and you can't lie straight in your bed at night after doing that to people all day. You just can't feel good about yourself. And so it's about intent. If you are persuading them because you know it's in their best interest, it's the best thing for them, even if they don't realize that themselves, and you've really thought through their issues and you know that this is going to be the best thing, well, then that's not manipulation, that's persuasion.
Yeah. No, I was just trained that way, because I had been in my 35 years in IT. I have sold multi-million dollar projects, $20-30 million projects. I don't think I ever sold anything, and I started out in software that was under $250,000. And back at that time, that was a lot more money than it is today. And so it was a practiced approach. You had to make sure that you were building the value, doing all these things and practicing these things. And I got to be at a point where I didn't care what type of meeting I was going on. Man, I had a game plan for every single meeting, every single set of communications. And like I said, I'm nobody special, but I tell you that's a lot better than going into a situation of communications and winging it. Because if you're winging it, you're going to get sidetracked with some emotions. And the next thing you know, the conversation's gone off the rails in a direction you don't want it to go.
Yes, well, that's right. And, most of us tend to try to persuade the people around us in the way that we ourselves would be persuaded. You're not trying to persuade yourself. You're trying to persuade the other person.
That's a very good point. So you have to put on their shoes and their perspective and understand, what are their motivations that are going to get
right. There. What are all the possible objections? There's a linguistic pattern for managing objections. If you know what those tools are, then in the right moment, you can pull the right tool out of your communication toolkit and you can just move the communication along smoothly. The whole point of getting good at persuasion, presenting, communicating in general, I think, is just less of a waste of time, less backwards and forwards, less silly decision making, less inability to make decisions, and let's just fast track this and let's all get on with it, really. Right. One of my very core values is achieving things.
Yes, exactly. So when did you write your book?
Back in 2009, I think I wrote the first version of this book. It was called, you'll laugh at this, it was called Don't Picture Me Naked. Because in presentation skills, they say, if you imagine your audience naked.
Yeah, don't picture me naked.
So clearly that doesn't work.
No, that's for sure. Yeah.
So I called the book Don't Picture Me Naked. I self-published it, and it was pretty successful. I mean, by American standards, it wasn't successful, but by Australian standards, it was. I think I sold about 3,500 copies of my little self-published book, and it looked and smelt like a book, and it was full of really good content. And then, interestingly, Wiley, the biggest business book publisher in Australia, contacted me. They'd seen the book. And they said to me, we would like to take your book over, which doesn't happen to very many authors.
No, not very often.
Take a book that's already been released.
Yeah, sure.
So I thought about that for a while. They said, we can make this book really successful. And if we give it a new title, give it a new cover, you need to add 20% content to it so that it's a revised edition, a legitimate revised edition, then we could take it on for you. So I accepted the offer with Wiley, and the new book is called How to Present: The Ultimate Guide to Presenting Your Ideas and Influencing People Using Techniques That Actually Work. And in there is everything from my 2-day masterclass that I have run 904 times. So how to do your analysis, how to do your design, how to do your delivery. And so it went to bestseller very quickly. In the first few weeks of publication, it hit the bestseller list. And I think we've probably sold somewhere around 10 or 11,000 copies over the last, and that was in 2013. So over the last 8 years or so.
Okay, that's great. Now, is the book available on Amazon or other online vendors today?
Yes, it is. It's just available in any good bookstore in any country that you live in, and also on the Kindle.
Fantastic. That's great. Now, have you thought about converting that over to an audiobook, or are you just doing it through Kindle? Or
I do get asked about the audiobook, and it's interesting. To be honest, I haven't explored it with Wiley. I'm not sure if I'm even allowed to do an audiobook when they've published this book. So that's one problem. I do actually have a fantastic audio program that is 14 hours of interviews with the top speakers from Australia.
Okay.
And some of whom have made it really big in the US, and people like Amanda Gore, who really were some of the best speakers that ever visited the US. So I've had this great product, and most of the people that ask me for an audio version of my book are just as happy to download the audio program that I also offer as a resource on my site.
Okay, fantastic.
So that's kind of prevented me from doing it.
Now, how did the pandemic affect your business? I mean, it's been a worldwide chaos.
Yeah, it has been a crazy time. Well, I got skinny and fit, so that was one good thing.
That's opposite. Most people were talking about their COVID 15 or 20, not the other way around. So good for you.
Yeah, I mean, really, there was no work in Australia for speakers and trainers.
No.
There were some people we all moved to Zoom, so we all did some work with our existing and new clients on Zoom, but really most of us our businesses were just really decimated. I think my income went down by 87% or something like that. But I just took it as an opportunity. Well, firstly, I took it as an opportunity to get comfortable with the online technology like Zoom, because we have to grow and evolve. We have to have a growth mindset. If you're going to be an educator, you have to believe that it's okay to learn new things. So that was good. I embraced the technology, but also just took the opportunity to get a rest, because I'd been running that training course every week of the year for up to that point 21 years, and I was probably a bit tired, to be honest, from doing that. I was speaking, I was working with big pitch teams and bid teams. I'd written the book, I'd released a couple of other different resources. So I've always been a hard worker, and I was probably a little bit tired. So I took the chance to walk along Manly Beach where I live and bond with my dog, which is a very handsome Buddy the Labradoodle.
Okay, yeah.
And, cook meals for my family. I'm a full-time worker, so I don't think I've really ever made school lunches in my whole life. And in this COVID year, I made my 16-year-old lunch every single day of her life at school. No lunch orders for the whole year.
That's fantastic.
So 10 out of 10 to me. I suddenly became a proper mum.
That's right. So now, are you delivering your training via Zoom? Do you have pre-recorded evergreen type things? How are you engaging customers if I want to get your course today?
Yes, over Zoom, but actually in Australia, we have in New South Wales, we have no cases, no locally acquired cases of COVID. Nice. Australia has really managed COVID so brilliantly. We had a hard time from an income point of view, but, I've got neighbours, Rex, who just went to work every day the way they always have. Yeah. And there are a lot of people in Australia, nothing really changed for them. Their income was the same, their job was the same. things have just remained the same. We are so blessed in this country. I don't know a single person who has had COVID, and certainly no one that's had, a traumatic result from COVID. We wear masks every now and then because the government tells us to, but really we have been very safe and everything is very well managed. So I've been running live training, the same course that we've been talking about today. I've been running that since early February, and every week since then. I've gone back to the way I always worked this year, and so every week I run one of those courses, and I run it live in a room with 10 people.
I'm much now. We had a short lockdown period here in Colorado, and then we have a hyper governor who wanted us to wear masks and everything. But I pretty much ran my life how it'd been before. And now I bumped into the virus thanks to kids who were getting together without any social distancing and didn't think there's any consequences. But I ran through the whole thing in about a week, and I just went on with my life. And it's just been interesting to watch.
I think you're lucky.
Yeah, it's been interesting to watch the world. I don't want to turn it into a big COVID show or anything like that, but in so many parts of the world, it was so mismanaged. And it's been interesting to see.
We're very lucky in Australia. So yes, it was a hard year income-wise last year, and for most speakers, we all, if they were telling the truth, we'd all say the same thing. But for most people who already had a brand and a reputation, once February came, we were off and running again, just the way we always have.
Well, that's great. That's great.
Yes.
So what's next on your horizon? Any more books? Any new projects?
Yes.
More courses?
Yes, a new book.
What's next?
Yep. So I have How to Present, and I'm writing How to Persuade. It's taken me 10 years to create a psychometric assessment tool called the Persuasion Smart Profile that's available on my website. And this is a profile that assesses, it's an online assessment tool, psychological assessment tool, and it assesses your persuasive strengths and weaknesses at work.
Oh, cool.
What we know is that there's 4 main approaches to persuade other people. And most of us, whilst all of us need all 4 approaches, really, we do tend to prioritize 1, 2, maybe even 3 of the approaches when we are being persuaded. And we tend to use the same approach that we would like someone to use on us when we are persuading others. And of course, the point is that if you're persuasion smart, you know yourself, you know others, you can build enough communication muscle that you have the right approaches to use at the right time. And then you need to adapt that to your customer, to your stakeholder. So the Persuasion Smart Profile, it tells you, it's a very good tool for assessing where are you strong and where are you weak, where is the gap. And then it also assesses your predisposition to persuade. So you've come out very high, Rex, on that. There are lots of us, I do too. My predisposition to persuade is somewhere in the high 90s, but your predisposition to persuade is your care factor, how driven you are to persuade the people around you. So if you're a natural salesperson like you are, you probably do have a very high predisposition to persuade. And in sales roles, that's pretty important. If you don't love persuading others, you probably shouldn't be in sales, to be honest. It's going to be hard for you, unpleasant, unfun. So that's another interesting dimension in the Persuasion Smart Profile. So we're very excited about that. We launched that in February, and it's slowly building momentum. I've had a couple of people who run businesses who are trained psychiatrists who are very excited about what our Persuasion Smart Profile assesses and the way that it assesses it, and they've rolled it out with their business.
Fantastic. So give out your website again real quick so people can follow you.
It's www.michellebowden.com.au.
Fantastic. So a couple last questions. I hear you have an inspiring basketball player. Tell me a little bit about that.
I do. My little Annabelle, she's 16 and she has great ambitions to play college basketball in America. So if anyone's listening and they're looking for an amazing Australian point guard, please reach out via Rex's podcast.
Yeah.
It's very hard when you're all the way over in Australia because, of course, the main way kids from Australia get into colleges is by doing a tour.
Yeah.
Getting on a what they're calling a canister of COVID and flying across the ocean.
A canister of COVID.
Yeah.
That's great.
So there won't be any basketball tours for my Annabelle in the next few years. And for that reason, it's going to be very difficult for anyone to even know she exists all the way over here on this little island that we live on.
Well,
so, yeah.
As somebody who was a former collegiate athlete, football player, and I have lots of people in those spaces and stuff, not on basketball, but the colleges will tell you the kids recruit us, we don't recruit the kids. Yeah. So get on your horse and just go, because there's plenty of schools playing basketball at all levels. And the one thing I love about basketball is you can be an itty bitty tiny school and still can be competing at the highest levels with the big universities.
Yeah, that's right. There's a girl that plays basketball with my daughter, and her name's Rebecca Dallinger. She arrived in the States I think she went over there in August last year, and she was voted the best player in all the junior colleges. Yeah. And out of all the players, she won that award, and she's an Australian. So isn't that just so exciting, from the North's Basketball Association in Sydney, Australia? Really exciting to see her
that's
achieving
exciting.
Like that.
And it's one of those things, it's your persistence level. Obviously there's some skill, it's required, but your persistence level will be more important than anything else. And you can start at the JC level or Division II or NAIA, or, one of the biggest men's basketball programs in the country is Gonzaga. That's a tiny school.
Right.
There are high schools that are almost the size of Gonzaga. So, it just doesn't matter. And I love that about basketball, because you can be any size of school and still compete. So good luck to her on that.
Thank you so much, Rex.
Check in on her progress, because we always need more people that can play some good basketball. That's for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Now, my last question, and you probably already know what's coming because you've listened to an episode or two, and I did not steal this idea from Trav Bell over there in Melbourne. The
bucket list guy.
The bucket list guy. He's been on the show, number 60. But you know what I'm talking about. We all have a bucket list, things we want to do before we die. But then there's the opposite. It rhymes with bucket, starts with an F, but this is a family show, okay? So something that might be on the list of things that you're never going to want to do.
Skydive.
Okay, that's a good one. I hear that one.
Scuba dive.
Scuba dive, okay.
My husband swims at Manly Beach in Sydney, Australia. It's full of beautiful fish, smooth rays, sharks.
Yeah.
He's there every morning, summer, winter, every season. And it's definitely put me off ever wanting to scuba dive, listening to him talk about all those sharks.
I'm right there with you, because I can't imagine being in the water with something big enough to eat me. Okay, I'm sorry.
My goodness. Well, let me tell you, the big smooth rays that we see at Manly Beach are bigger than a double bed. And they go with their big, their big body, and they bury themselves in the sand, and all you can see is the little eyeballs peeking out. So if you are a novice and you don't know that they're there, you would tread on that, and then just like Steve Irwin, the crocodile guy, you're going to get barbed by that fella, and that's the end of you.
That's it.
So it's serious. No scuba diving for me.
No, I'm right there with you. Those are great answers. Well, listen, you've been very transparent. Great to meet you. Great to learn about it. And of all the people I've interviewed, you're right up there in probably the top 1 or 2% of people of passion. I mean, you just exudes from you what you do. You obviously love what you're doing. You're an incredible expert at it. And for me, someone who's sitting here on this side of the chair, who does a lot of speaking, a lot of talking, a lot of presentations, I'm sitting there thinking, man, I need to get a hold of Michelle and see if I'm making sure if I've got all my tools sharpened here, because you're doing a great job. So I appreciate you.
You're very generous, Rex. Thank you so much. I appreciate your interest.
All right. Well, listen, that'll call it for an episode today. We appreciate everybody stopping by and listening. We appreciate your listenership every time. We know you have so many choices out there for content. So thank you. And so we'll say the same 3 things that I say at the end of every episode. Be safe, but be bold, and make it a great day.